Hey there. Before we dive into this powerful story, please give it a like if it resonates with you and drop a comment below to share your thoughts. What do you think about this tale of justice and accountability? Your feedback keeps these stories alive. This is a gripping tale of assumptions, power, and the consequences of underestimating the wrong person. When a respected black teacher is wrongfully arrested in front of his students over a petty grudge, the police think they've asserted control. But 30 minutes later, two FBI agents walk into the station, and the truth unravels faster than anyone could have imagined. What happens when the man you dismissed turns out to be a federal consultant with a direct line to justice? Prepare for a story that challenges how we view authority, respect, and redemption. James Carter, a 52-year-old black history teacher, pulled into the parking lot of Lincoln High School in Charlotte, North Carolina, on a crisp Monday morning in October 2025. His silver Honda Accord, a reliable relic from 2012, hummed softly as he parked in his usual spot near the faculty entrance. Dressed in a navy button-up shirt, khaki slacks, and polished loafers, he carried a worn leather briefcase stuffed with lesson plans, graded essays, and a thermos of black coffee. His wire-rimmed glasses sat low on his nose, and his salt and pepper hair was neatly cropped, giving him the air of someone who valued order and purpose. James had taught at Lincoln High for 18 years, earning a reputation as a strict but fair educator. His classroom, room 204, was a sanctuary of structure where students learned not just history, but the weight of accountability. "You don't get to rewrite the past," he'd often say, "but you can shape what comes next by showing up prepared." His students respected him, even if some grumbled about his high standards. To James, teaching wasn't just a job. It was a calling rooted in his own journey, a kid from a working-class family in Raleigh who'd clawed his way through college on scholarships and sheer will. That morning, James began his 10th grade history class with a lecture on the civil rights movement, his voice steady and commanding as he paced before a projector screen. The Voting Rights Act of 1965 wasn't just a law, he said, pointing to a grainy photo of marchers in Selma. It was a promise, hard-won, that every voice matters. But promises can be broken if we don't hold people accountable. The room was quiet, save for the scribbling of pens and the occasional creak of a desk. 25 students listened, some rapt, others distracted by their phones. Among them was Ethan Daniels, a lanky 16-year-old with a mop of blonde hair and a permanent smirk. Ethan was the son of Lieutenant Michael Daniels, a 20-year veteran of the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department, and a man who wielded influence both in the precinct and the community. Ethan, however, was less impressive. He coasted through school, relying on charm and his father's name to skate by. In James's class, that didn't work. James returned a stack of essays that day, and Ethan's landed on his desk with a red D- circled at the top. Incomplete analysis, unanswered questions, and you ignored the rubric, James said matter-of-factly, moving to the next student. Ethan's face flushed. He shoved the paper into his backpack, muttering, "This is bullshit." A girl next to him, Aaliyah, shot him a look, but said nothing. After class, Ethan lingered, his frustration boiling over. "Why you always gotta call me out like that?" he demanded. James, erasing the whiteboard, didn't flinch. "I'm not calling you out, Ethan. I'm grading your work. If you don't like the result, do the assignment properly next time." Ethan stormed out, already texting his father. "Mr. Carter's got it out for me. Humiliated me in front of everyone. Gave me a D for no reason." Lieutenant Michael Daniels was at his desk in the precinct when the message buzzed through. A burly man in his mid-40s with a buzz cut and a permanent scowl, Daniels was used to solving problems with authority. He'd risen through the ranks by being decisive, sometimes cutting corners, but always backing his team. To him, Ethan's complaint wasn't just a teenager's tantrum. It was an attack on his family's reputation. Without calling the school or checking Ethan's work, Daniels decided this teacher needed a lesson. "Some nobody picking on my kid," he muttered, grabbing his phone. By noon, Daniels had a plan. He didn't bother with a formal complaint to the school board. That would take too long and might backfire if Ethan's work was as bad as it sounded. Instead, he called two officers under his command, Officers Tom Hayes and Carla Rodriguez, both loyal to him. "We've got a disturbance at Lincoln High," he told them. "Teacher named James Carter's causing trouble. Bring him in for questioning." When Hayes asked for details, Daniels waved it off. "Just do it. I'll handle the paperwork later." There was no report, no evidence, just Daniels' word. At 2:15 p.m., James was midway through a discussion on the Montgomery bus boycott when the classroom door swung open. Officers Hayes and Rodriguez stepped in, their boots heavy on the linoleum floor. Hayes, a stocky man with a crew cut, spoke first. "James Carter, you're coming with us." The room froze. Students exchanged wide-eyed glances, and Aaliyah whispered, "What's going on?" James set down his marker, his expression calm, but his mind racing. "May I ask what this is about?" he said evenly. "You'll find out at the station," Rodriguez replied, her tone clipped. She was younger, early 30s, with a tight ponytail and a hand resting on her utility belt. The officers moved toward him, and Hayes pulled out handcuffs. "Is that necessary?" James asked, raising an eyebrow. "Procedure," Hayes grunted. The cuffs clicked around James's wrists, cold and tight, in full view of the class. A boy in the back, Malik, started recording on his phone. "This ain't right," he muttered. Aaliyah's hand shot up. "He didn't do anything." "Stay seated," Rodriguez snapped at the class. James, still composed, turned to his students. "Finish the reading on page 87. I'll be back soon." His voice was steady, but his eyes locked on Ethan for a split second. Ethan looked away, slumping in his seat. As the officers led James out, the hallway filled with curious students and a few teachers peering from their doors. Principal Linda Harper rushed over, her face pale. "Officers, what's happening?" Hayes brushed her off. "Official business. Call the precinct if you have questions." In the squad car, James sat silently in the back, his briefcase confiscated and placed in the trunk. Hayes drove, glancing at him in the rearview mirror. "You must have pissed off the wrong person," he said with a smirk. James didn't respond. Instead, he mentally cataloged the situation. No stated charges, no warrant. Public arrest in front of minors. This wasn't just sloppy, it was illegal. As they pulled into the precinct, James asked for his phone call. Rodriguez handed him his cell, standing nearby as he dialed two numbers. The first was his lawyer, Sarah Nguyen, a sharp civil rights attorney he'd known since college. The second call was brief, to someone whose name he didn't mention. "It's James," he said quietly. "I'm at the CMPD precinct on Trade Street." "Yes. Now." At the station, James was led to a holding room with a metal table and a one-way mirror. His cuffs stayed on, a deliberate slight. Outside, Hayes and Rodriguez chatted with a desk sergeant, chuckling. "Guy thinks he's untouchable 'cause he's got a chalkboard," Hayes said. Lieutenant Daniels joined them, his arms crossed. "He give you any trouble?" he asked. Rodriguez shook her head. "Quiet as a mouse. Said something about us breaking federal law, though." Daniels laughed. "Yeah, right. Let him stew." Inside the room, James sat straight-backed, his hands folded despite the cuffs. He'd been in tough spots before, growing up in a rough neighborhood, facing skeptical professors in grad school, even navigating school politics as a black educator in a system that often undervalued him. This wasn't new, but it was personal. Daniels entered, looming over the table. "You think you can embarrass my kid and walk away?" he said, his voice low. "Ethan's a good boy, and you're out here playing tough guy." James met his gaze. "Your son earned his grade. If you have an issue, take it to the school board. This," he nodded at the cuffs, "this is a federal violation. Title 18, Section 242, Deprivation of Rights under color of law." Daniels blinked, then sneered. "You're no lawyer. Save it for the judge." He turned to leave, tossing over his shoulder, "Enjoy your night." James's voice stopped him. "You have 30 minutes before this gets worse for you." Daniels didn't look back, but his shoulders tensed. Outside, the officers resumed their banter, unaware of the storm brewing. At 3:05 p.m., exactly 27 minutes after James's second call, the precinct's glass doors swung open. Two figures in tailored suits strode in, their presence slicing through the casual hum of the station. Special Agent Laura Mitchell, a wiry woman in her 40s with a steel gaze, flashed her FBI badge at the desk sergeant. Beside her was Agent David Kwan, a calm, broad-shouldered man carrying a leather portfolio. "We're here for James Carter," Mitchell said, her voice like a blade. "Get Lieutenant Daniels and the arresting officers. Now." The sergeant fumbled with the phone, his eyes darting between the agents. Officers in the bullpen stopped typing, their conversations dying mid-sentence. Daniels emerged from his office, his confidence faltering as he saw the badges. "What's this about?" he demanded, trying to keep his tone firm. Mitchell didn't blink. "You detained a federal consultant without cause, based on a personal vendetta. We have school security footage, student recordings, and a complaint filed directly with our office. You're looking at a violation of federal law." The room went silent. Hayes and Rodriguez, standing nearby, exchanged uneasy glances. Kwan opened his portfolio, pulling out a tablet. "This is James Carter's file," he said, swiping to a document. "Consultant for the U.S. Department of Education, specializing in ethical standards for public schools. 5 years in the role, with Level 3 security clearance. Any action against him triggers immediate oversight from our Civil Rights Division." He looked at Daniels. "You didn't even run a background check, did you?" Daniels' face drained of color. We thought he was causing a disturbance," he stammered. Mitchell cut him off. "You thought wrong. You acted on a personal grudge, bypassed protocol, and arrested a man in front of minors without a warrant or probable cause. That's not a mistake. That's misconduct." She turned to the sergeant. "Release Mr. Carter, now." James was brought out, his cuffs removed. He rubbed his wrists, but stood tall, his expression unreadable. Mitchell approached him. "Mr. Carter, are you all right?" He nodded. "I'm fine. Thank you for coming." Quan handed him his briefcase. "Do you want to press charges?" James looked at Daniels, who was now sweating under the fluorescent lights. Hayes and Rodriguez stood frozen, their earlier smirks gone. The entire precinct seemed to hold its breath. "No charges," James said finally. "This isn't about me. It's about the students who saw this, the people who come after me, and the system that let this happen. Fix it." He turned to Daniels. "Your son's grade stands. Tell him to do the work. And you?" He paused, letting the weight settle. "Learn to ask questions before you act." Mitchell nodded, her lips twitching in what might have been approval. "We're launching an internal investigation," she said to Daniels. "You're suspended pending review, Officers Hayes and Rodriguez. You'll face disciplinary hearings. We'll be in touch." Quan added, "The footage is already with our analysts. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." As the agents escorted James out, the precinct buzzed with whispers. Officers avoided Daniel's gaze as he slumped against a desk, his authority unraveling. Hayes muttered to Rodriguez, "How were we supposed to know?" She shook her head, staring at the floor. The desk sergeant picked up the phone, already fielding calls from the media. Someone had leaked the story. Outside, James climbed into his Accord, the agents watching as he drove off. Mitchell turned to Quan. "He could have buried them. Why didn't he?" Quan shrugged. "Some people fight for the lesson, not the win." They returned to their SUV, already drafting their report. The next Monday, James was back in room 204, his chalkboard filled with notes on the freedom rides. The class was quieter than usual, the students watching him with a mix of awe and curiosity. Aaliyah raised her hand. "Mr. Carter, you okay after, you know?" He smiled faintly. "I'm here, aren't I? Let's focus on the work." Malik, the boy who'd recorded the arrest, grinned. "You're a legend, man." Ethan sat in the third row, his head down. He'd turned in a rewritten essay that morning, a solid B-. James handed it back without comment, but their eyes met briefly, a silent understanding. Ethan didn't smirk. Instead, he opened his textbook and started reading. After class, Principal Harper stopped by. "James, the school board's behind you. We're reviewing our police liaison protocols. This won't happen again." James nodded. "Good. It's not just about me. It's about every teacher, every student, every person who walks through these doors." Harper hesitated, then added, "The media's calling. You want to talk to them?" James shook his head. Let the story speak for itself. That evening, James sat at his kitchen table, grading papers under a single lamp. His phone buzzed with messages from colleagues, friends, even a few students' parents, thanking him for standing tall. He ignored them, focusing on a stack of essays. But one email caught his eye from the Department of Education. They'd scheduled a meeting to discuss expanding his consultancy role, citing his demonstrated integrity under pressure. He closed the laptop, sipping his coffee. The fight wasn't over, but today's lesson had landed. The precinct, meanwhile, was in chaos. Daniel's suspension made local news, and the FBI's investigation uncovered other complaints about his conduct. Patterns of intimidation, favoritism, and cutting corners. Hayes and Rodriguez were reassigned to desk duty, their careers in limbo. The Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department issued a public apology, promising reforms. But for the officers involved, the real sting was knowing they'd underestimated James Carter, a man who'd turned their mistake into a mirror they couldn't ignore. Back at Lincoln High, the story became legend. Students whispered about Mr. Carter's FBI moment, and teachers used it in lessons about justice. Ethan, once a slacker, started showing up prepared, his father's shadow no longer enough to carry him. Aliyah and Malik launched a school blog writing about fairness and accountability, dedicating their first post to James. He didn't just teach us history, they wrote. He showed us how to live it. This story isn't just about one teacher or one cop. It's about the power of truth, the danger of assumptions, and the quiet strength of those who stand firm when the world tries to push them down. It's a reminder that leadership isn't about titles or badges. It's about doing what's right, even when the odds are stacked against you. If this moved you, hit that like button, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more real-world stories that challenge what we think we know about courage and accountability.